Hello, my lovelies, and welcome back. I do have a new guest. I'm always confused. Is it left? Is it right?
I know.
I don't.
You're on my left at the moment, but yeah, whatever.
Okay, yeah, you're on my right, so this might be whatever. My guest, Matthew, the wonderful, lovely Matthew, who will introduce himself, is here today to talk about one of my favorite topics, and I do think you love this topic as well. I didn't take long to convince you to come on. Yes, we're talking about the last Númenorian king, Ar-Pharazôn the Golden. But before we start, Matt, please introduce yourself. Who are you? What are you doing? And why are you here?
That's right. I run a channel called the Dork Lords. So if you look up the Dork Lords, one word, and on that, I have a playlist. It's actually just hit 100 videos of Tolkien topics. The next one I'm doing, actually, I decided to branch off and do mini topics. So people have sent me little things that don't take up an entire video. And I thought it would be easier, frankly, like, oh, look, I can just, but actually researching one small thing 15 times then actually becomes just as time consuming as researching a big full topic like Ar-Pharazôn, for instance.
100%. And Matt has, I will link one of my favorite videos down below, which is literally about Ar-Pharazôn and the Númenor video. And yeah, I really, because what you just said before we started recording, I think we have similar theories about Númenor and about Sauron and about the Witch King.
Right.
And yeah, so I think this will be a very interesting discussion. And yeah, go check out Matt's channel. It's amazing. I found you through Googling on YouTube Númenor videos. And yeah, I really like your content and
nice.
what you do.
I really appreciated your Witch King theory video. It does, it matches up with some thoughts that I had as well. So I think we are simpatico.
Yes, and maybe, we will learn more if we're right or wrong in the Amazon series. So who knows?
They've said, obviously, it was fairly clear that Númenor was going to be part of it, but it's now confirmed for sure that, Númenor is going to be a part of this. Where it fits into I think it's like a 5-season arc at this point. I feel like it's maybe a little later in the arc, but still, it'll be there. Cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, they won't start with Ar-Pharazôn because that's literally just before the drowning of Númenor, because he was king just for like 60-something years, so it wouldn't make sense to start with him. But I think we can agree that he will be in there in the later game.
100%. He's going to be there. Yeah.
Because that's what I always say. This is the best time in Númenor because literally it's like debauchery, burning people alive.
Oh,
I mean,
man. Well,
this is what I'm here for.
Sacrifice.
Yes.
Treachery at every corner, and then you've got the ultimate villain hanging out on the island in disguise. Well, not in disguise, but
exactly.
luring people with corrupting them. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is what I'm here for. And when you just know the Lord of the Ring movies, you're like, oh, but wait, all these rangers, they seem like really good people, good guys. Well, their ancestors were not.
That's right. There was a little controversy there.
Yeah, and this is what we'll talk about. So one of the baddest baddies from, I think we can agree he's a baddie, and it's not because of Sauron, and we'll get to that.
Right. Not a tragic hero, in my opinion.
No.
He was a jerk, and then was made more of a jerk by the presence of Sauron.
Exactly. So, what we'll do, guys, is we talk you a bit through for the ones who don't know, like, what is this woman talking about? Who is this? So we'll talk you a bit through the history and give you some dates and facts about who was this 25th and last king of the Númenorians. And then we'll have a few nerdy discussions on questions Matt and I have. And yeah, this is how this will go. I hope you'll enjoy it. And so let's start, Matt. So what would you, what's the most outstanding facts you know about Ar-Pharazôn?
Well, I think one of the character-defining facts about him is that he takes the throne by force.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's the son of the brother, so he's the nephew of the king. Yeah. King is Tar-Palantir, a wise king, good king, member of the faithful, the same group as Elendil and Isildur.
Yeah. Aragorn's ancestors, basically, the other line.
And so Tar-Palantir's brother Ar-Pharazon's dad, was it Gimilcad, I believe is his name?
Gimilcad, yeah.
He is a member of the Kingsmen, right? So they are opposed to the Valar. They're opposed to the ban of the Valar. So like father, like son, Ar-Pharazon's like, yep, I'm all on board with the Kingsmen. Boo, faithful. And so Gimilcad is opposed to his brother's rule. But notably, Ar-Pharazon spends his early life in Middle-earth. He's a military man. So he's acquiring territory for Númenor. And he doesn't come back to Númenor until his dad dies. And I think that's important because perhaps you might say, oh, he was just really committed to the cause of the Kingsmen and this idea. But not really. Not really. He came back because he saw it as a chance. Yeah. It was one less person between him and the throne.
Yes.
And so he comes back and he leads basically a civil war against the rightful king. And then, it doesn't say how Tar-Palantir died. I always wondered whether maybe somehow in the civil, but anyway, we'll assume he died of natural causes, but he dies, but after 12 years. So Ar-Pharazon's on Númenor, rebelling against the king for 12 years. Yeah. King dies, and then he's like, now's my chance.
Yeah.
The king's got a daughter, not a son. I'm going to marry the daughter and just force my way into the kingship. Wow, it's just really cutthroat. It's a cutthroat guy.
And what I found outstanding and what is interesting, like the way Tolkien portrays these queens, like all these queens, except you have the feeling Silmarillion, she should actually have been queen, right? But then, she was cheated out of that and her younger brother got it like centuries ago. But all these queens, they are literally not fit to rule. They are not interested in ruling. We do not really know if Miriel, that was his wife then, the 24th king's daughter, and she should have become queen. I think she would have been the fourth queen. Yeah, I think
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. And, all these queens were reluctant. They were not really, and it started early on, and they were not really, they were not that interested in ruling. And in a way, I find it sad that Tolkien portrays queens in that way. But then, there were like a few English queens where he might have taken,
no, like Elizabeth I. I mean, she was.
No, she definitely was not a Miriel. No, but yeah, I find it interesting, that because that made it so easy for him. What you say, to just marry her, and she was his cousin, and we know how Tolkien disliked and. Whenever he portrays unnatural love, it is love of close relatives. Think about Idril and Meglin. Like, they would be first cousins and he was in love with her. And this is very unnatural, portrayed as unnatural, and it never ends well.
And I think he even says, I'm forgetting the exact text, but somewhere there it's about Númenorian law. It was like, no, it was a no. And he did it anyway because he's like, look, I'm going to get the kingship, so this is how I'm going to do it. Yeah, I have an army, so you're going to pay attention to me.
Exactly, and the thing is, what is known is that the kings always married into Silmarillion's line. They always took wives from, and this is a bit, inbreeding. They always took wives, Tolkien says, from the line of the faithful. And this is what Gimilcad and all these people did as well. So yes, I just find it interesting that, okay, another weak queen, and then he just marries her.
She has a tragic end. I mean, they all do.
My God, her climbing the mountain that. I want to see that in movie, like in film, By the way.
And you wonder, I mean, obviously we're cutting ahead here, but when the downfall is happening, she's running for safety. The flood is coming, and she's running up the tallest mountain on Númenor. Yeah. Minotarma, and she doesn't run fast enough, I guess. But there's also maybe that thought. I don't know. I mean, considering her dad, Tar-Palantir, member of the faithful, she maybe had leanings toward the faithful as well. She kind of got coerced, basically. Yeah. Maybe in that moment, maybe there was, apart from just simple survival, maybe she was going to try to make some plea, to go up and be like, "Whoa, please, wait, we're sorry."
And
never got
this
the
is
chance.
what the mountain was for. It was a holy sacred mountain. Only the king and the royal family was basically going there, like paying tribute to the gods, to God, to Eru, to the Vala. Yeah, in a way, yes, it was the highest peak in the land. So, if something is drowning,
You
I
head for
would
high
run up
ground.
that
Yeah.
mountain. But yes, I think that is very, very plausible. And we know to, again, we're going ahead a bit, but we know that one of the faithful, he sailed Amandil, so Elendil's father. He sailed to Valinor. He tried what Earendil centuries ago did, pleading with Vala, saying, "Listen, something is really wrong in Númenor.
Right. Listen,
Can you
please.
can you help us?" And till today, I have no idea where the heck is Amandil. Is he still sailing somewhere? Is he?
I mean, I think the excuse me. I think the conventional wisdom is that he passed away, right? I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
now, interestingly, too, Pharazôn was a friend, I guess, like maybe a childhood or young adult
Yes.
friend of
Yes.
Amandil,
Yes.
which some people used to say, like, well, hey, see, he wasn't all bad. But I wonder if maybe he was just a friend of Amandil because he knew he was part of the line. And so it's like, hey, this is a good networking opportunity for me. I don't know. Anyway, I'm
Yeah.
probably being harsh on Pharazôn, but
Hmm.
he seems cunning,
Yeah.
ambitious,
Hmm.
and most of his actions are taken with that in mind, and not some kind of a, hey, look, I'm just a good guy, and
Mm.
let's have friendship.
But yeah, and it's interesting that, he looked very promising. He looked like one of those kings, like he very much reminds me of Aldarion, right? Who was one of the first one. He invented the mariner, the guild of the mariners and all that. He was the one kind of colonizing, but not the bad colonizing, what they did later. He colonized Middle Earth. He came to Middle Earth as a teacher, and later they became suppressors, right?
Yeah, I would say he was like a diplomat to the
Yes.
elves,
Yeah,
and whereas Pharazôn came in as a conqueror, as
exactly.
but
Yeah.
take by force.
Yes, they went from teachers to conquerors, which and but still, it's interesting because what you said, he was a war hero. Like people really cheered for him,
Mm-hmm.
and this is always the picture I have of Númenor at that time because, like you said, the predecessor Tar-Palantir was actually the first one since many many kings that tried to turn back to the to the faithful. He tried to undo things his predecessors have done, and you can see that. And I think you also mentioned that in your video. I just can recommend that.
Oh,
um, that I think from the 18th king onwards, they changed the prefix in the
oh,
name.
sure. Tar
Yes,
versus R. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. So they no longer used the Elvish language basically to define their kingship with a tar, and they used the Numenorian word ar. So all of the ars basically people are the baddies. No, not really.
Right, yeah, it's not a one-to-one correlation, but it's pretty close. And
It
in
is
this
close.
case, Tar Palantir, good guy.
Yes.
Ar-Pharazôn, bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. And when I was first reading that, I thought, oh, maybe they have a chance. You think when you go through the Silmarillion and like Anfinn Shells and everywhere where you have like information about Númenor, you the and Calabeth, when you read through it, you're like, oh, maybe they can still turn this around,
oh,
but the Vala literally left them before. Like there was no hope left. And even Tarpalantia could have tried whatever. I think it was literally too late. There was, like, or
well, he was
what is
known
the,
also as the far-sighted, and so he had that prophecy because they were,
yeah.
the Nimloth, the white tree, was this
Mhm.
a symbol of their friendship with the Valar, and his prophecy was, hey, when that tree dies, so do we.
Yes.
And sure enough, in the time of Ar-Pharazôn, they cut down the tree, they burn it in the temple, and
Yeah.
oops, bad times are on the way.
Yeah. And what I find super interesting, and we can talk about this thing, because this was actually the first stream I suggested to you about mortality versus immortality. And there's a really cool dialogue of an mortal and an immortal about that. But he's portrayed as the one literally obsessed with mortality. And how do you see that? Because this is what I'm always preaching. I think literally the Vala and Eru set up this island for they doomed it from the beginning, because first of all they
Well,
set it inside of the undying lands. They gave them things normal humans didn't even know existed. It is like, showing you paradise in front of you but saying, oh, but you can't come, no, really, this is how I always saw it, and I thought this is doomed from the beginning.
I
And
gotcha. No, that makes sense. Also, that notion of the gift of men being this. Hey, you get to die and then go ascend. Transcend
Mhm.
Arda essentially. But the idea of seeing all these immortal beings and thinking, well, hey, I want to live 200 years. Where's my
Yeah,
immortality?
yeah.
Which was really cool because there's a um, Arwen. She's
Mhm,
talking to Aragorn when Aragorn's dying,
mhm,
and she's acknowledging that she has accepted mortality.
mhm,
And in that paragraph, I think it's in
mhm.
the appendices.
Yes.
She brings up the fact, she's like, you know what? I get it now. I
Mhm.
always saw Ar-Pharazôn as this villain, but now that I'm facing my own mortality, I see the depths you might go to avoid that death. So she actually feels empathy in that moment, which is really interesting. But
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And they don't doom him completely. I mean, at the end, in Middle Earth, they build him a statue basically.
that's
So
right. And doesn't Sauron tear it down? And then anyway, but yeah, yes, they
yeah,
build him a
Aaron
statue.
Carrot, yes, he did. Yeah, he did.
Well, he
Um,
also theoretically, he's not dead. I mean, the line is actually I wrote it down here. So this is when Pharazôn lands on Aman, and then Eru sends the world down on him, and it says. But Ar-Pharazôn the king and the mortal warriors that had set foot upon the land of Aman were buried under falling hills. There it is said they will lie imprisoned in the caves of the forgotten until the last battle and the day of doom. So
yeah.
maybe they're in a cave. They're not in a cave, but maybe they're in a cave.
No, I do think they are, and this is so. I'm like nerding out a lot here, and I told Matt about I love old German folk tales, and one of our myth in Germany is we had one really great king. It was Frederick the First. He was called Barbarossa, which means red beard. And we have a legend in Germany, and I do think Tolkien copied this. So the thing is, Barbarossa, Redbeard, King Redbeard, he fell under a spell, and he is buried in a chamber in a mountain, a very famous mountain in Germany. It's called the Kyffhäuser, and it's called the Kyffhäuser legend. And he's buried under that mountain, and it is said he awakes every 100 years, and he has a dwarf, and that dwarf always checks for him the outside world, and if the ravens are still flying around the mountain, he's not allowed to awake, because the world is everything is still going on.
Got you. Check.
And
Move on. Yeah.
yes, but he's buried under the mountain, and it is said in a kind of dagora, this is what you were talking about, he will come back. So when Germany is in dire need of this amazing king, he
Get
will,
ready,
yes, he will come back
Redbeard.
and fight it. Yes, exactly. And he will restore the order. And it is so cool. And it's very similar,
Yeah, it is very similar. I
it
think
is,
also maybe the idea of Merlin. One of the big
yes.
tales of him is that he's buried and one day he will come
It
back.
will return. Yes,
Yeah, but
exactly. So it is a very, he obviously took he was influenced by that. He didn't copy. I didn't mean it like that, but yes,
no,
obviously he
certainly an
was
homage. Yeah, yeah. In
but
fact, one thought would be in the case of say Barbarossa or Merlin, we might we might guess as to how they would help save Germany in that case, or England. I'm not sure what side Ar-Pharazôn will be fighting on in Dagger Dagger, right? When he comes back, it might be to fight on the wrong side. I don't know. Anyway,
I'm
to
pretty.
get the redemption.
Yeah, and this is the thing. See, like Turin, who gets the kill? Who gets to kill Morgoth, right? It is in the Dagorach. And for me, Turin is not a hero. I dislike Turin 100%. And I think, in my mind, this is my canon, Tolkien wants us to say, don't make wrong choices, because he did. He had free will, and he made all these wrong choices step by step by step. And I never got, why does Turin get the kill? I would get it if his father would get it, because he was literally the tragic one, and Turin is an evil guy. I don't like Turin.
I don't know if I mean, I get you. He does some terrible things where he, chops down, what is it, Reindeer the Lame or whatever. I mean, he does some bad things. But I would put him in the tragic hero category as opposed to Ar-Pharazôn. But I get you. I get you. You could certainly pick the worst things Turin's done, and it's not a good list.
No, and the comparison is for me because Tolkien. Why does he show you all these choices Turin had, and he made the wrong choice just because he was cursed? Is this curse even real? Like, this is exactly what
Right? Is it a curse or a prophecy? In other words, is it just saying
exactly
you're gonna make bad choices, and I'm seeing it, as opposed to I'm forcing fate on you, and so you're a pawn.
Yes, and he just used it as an excuse. I'm doomed. Then, like, no, I found for me, Turin, and this is, I agree with most people. Joysten and I literally fight over this. So shout out to Joysten.
That's awesome.
No, we because he sees it differently. But and so for me, they're in the same category. Yes, they, like it's a different story. But for me, Tolkien here also wants to say, and I do think this is why he started off. He's a war hero. He's a military genius, Ar-Pharazôn, and he was friends with the faithful. He maybe didn't start, like you said. He had ancestors, like his what would that be? His grandmother was one of the faithful. But then something went wrong, and he turned basically. And now maybe let's come to one of my favorite topics. What do you think? Was he influenced by the ring? Was it just Sauron? Was it the curse of the Númenorian kings, going in the wrong direction? Many kings before. What was it? How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel like we discussed the fact that he led this civil war. He married his cousin, all in the name of gaining the kingship, and that's well before he meets up with Sauron. And the reason he even goes to attack Sauron is Sauron's been infringing on Númenorian lands in Middle Earth, and it's somewhat like Ar-Pharazôn sees it as a threat to his. I want to be the king of all men, not Sauron. And so, while sure it does the nice thing of helping Middle Earth, his reasoning for doing it is, I want to be the master of all.
Yeah.
And so none of those are particularly positive traits. So I don't buy the idea that like he would have been fine if Sauron hadn't come in. I think he was already on the path to being a bad guy.
Yeah, and I do think, Tolkien set this up with the many kings that before him, like I said, the 18th king already used. So he was the 25th. So many generations before him, when it's mentioned, the shadow came to Númenor. So, it was set up to, the doom was pending. It was not, many deeds. They banned the elves. They banned to speak Elvish. They got the line of the faithful. They had to move to Romena.
Right. Exiling them to a little small wedge of space on
where you can spy on them.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of deeds were done by his predecessors. But still, this immortality thingy, being obsessed with that. And then Sauron coming and literally, whispering in his ear and telling him, what they're telling you might not be right. Do you really think he believed that?
Do I think that Sauron believed that the Valar,
No,
or you believe
that
Pharazôn believed Sauron? Yeah, I do actually. I mean, I think um, Sauron knew how to play on this guy's weaknesses, and
Yeah.
he saw it. Here's this guy that wants to be king of all men. He wants control. And so he wants control over his own death. I mean, he's so like just power hungry that the ultimate control is to live forever.
Yep.
And so he's like, look, I've got a way. You know who's in your way? The Valar. That's if you look at Melkor, he'll give you the option to be able to take that next step and become immortal. So yeah, I think Ar-Pharazôn buys in all the way, and probably I think we can state fairly confidently that Sauron had the ring in Númenor, and so the power of the ring, Sauron wearing it, and trying to manipulate someone while wearing the ring is probably a little easier to do than it might be otherwise.
Yeah, I agree that he had the ring in Numenor. It does not make sense, literally. I mean, this would be like, I mean, he poured himself, his malice, everything into this ring. Why would he leave it in? Because he did not foresee. This is what I said in my last video about what was it? Last video, I do not remember which king or something. Yeah, which king. In my last video, I said I do not believe Sauron really thought the gods, Eru and the Valar, so Eru would drown Númenor. I do not think he had that in. He thought they would get punished. This was what his plan was. You know, he saw, I can't defeat this army. Let them defeat themselves.
Yep, certainly.
And I do not think he really had in mind this island will drown. I don't think he believed that. And so I don't think he left the ring due to that at home. He brought the ring and took in, even, I think in letter
He
200
did.
something, he said he had the ring.
He had the ring, and that it wasn't a huge leap of reasoning to think that his spirit, disembodied spirit, could still take the ring back to Middle Earth with him. That's kind of his thing. So
Yeah.
that makes sense.
And this really show, I mean, Sauron was on his own before he had the ring. We know, the power of, he had duels with elves, so the power of word and song and all that was always with him, similar to Saruman. He had that power as well, right? The power of his voice. And Sauron definitely did have that before, but the ring even,
magnified that. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I do think also that Ar-Pharazôn did not know that he had the ring. I think the ring was secret. Otherwise, like, I'll take that. It was a secret.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And, the ring rates, they were already established, because we know that I think 2,225 or something like that. So 700 years after the rings were forged, the rings for the 9 kings of men, 750 years or 755 or whatever. Don't come at me in the comment section. They showed up for the first time. So all these 9 kings were already turned. Some were Númenóreans, and so I
there
think
wasn't
that
a ring to give, for one thing. He didn't have another. He didn't have a 10th ring to give to Ar-Pharazôn. So by that point, the rings had been distributed. If he had one to give, he probably would have given it, but he didn't. And so Ar-Pharazôn was not one of the 9.
No, he's just to clarify that. But what you said, everything was in secret. They didn't really. It's never said that they showed up for 15 times and tortured. Like nothing. We don't know anything. I think he kept that very on the low, because similar to Morgoth centuries earlier, he wanted to keep the dragons secret till their full might. Was till they've grown, till they knew how to fight and all that. And I do think Sauron wanted to keep the ring wraiths, because when Ar-Pharazôn attacked, the ring wraiths were actually ready to fight. They were,
if he'd wanted to throw them at Ar-Pharazôn's army, he could have, and he didn't.
He could have, and he didn't. So I really do think he wanted to keep that on the low. He wanted to, first of all, let them destroy themselves, and fall out of the grace of the Valar, because then Sauron knew the Valar won't help this time. If they do all these evil deeds, the Valar, and I think that was his plan, and I do think I have a theory that Sauron was in Númenor before. I do think Sauron
I think it's a reasonable idea. Yeah.
yeah, because I always say, like Tolkien was a linguist and he used the term the shadow for Sauron. That stands for Sauron. And why does he say multiple times the shadow came over Númenor? The shadow fell on Númenor, which is exactly at the same time the Witch King was born and stuff like like stuff like that. So he could use any term. He is a linguist. He has thousands of words he can use for saying and telling the reader, okay, something bad is happening, something is brewing. But he did not. He said the shadow.
Well, there's also that notion that, if I were to guess, he's got these 9 rings and he's giving them out to the folks. Oh, look, Camul the Easterling. Awesome. He'll be a good candidate. If he didn't, let's say if Sauron didn't cross the sea to Númenor, that means, assuming, again, which I think we both believe that a Númenorian king ended up becoming, say, the Witch King. Yeah. That means that he had to then entrust one of the 9 rings to someone else to take. And I don't think he would, by the way, why, if you're hanging out in there, why don't you hand this ring off? I mean, that would be a little tricky. So you're right. It feels more like he might have done the deed himself.
Yeah. Although we know he would have trusted them because he sent them out to get the ring. We know he would have trusted them to take it for a little while, but I don't think, they were, I think he had that ring. It was part of him. I would not leave, no, if I had that ring, I would wear it.
Something I found really interesting was in the passage when Sauron agrees to be taken hostage, essentially, by Ar-Pharazôn. My cat's about to jump up here.
Oh my God, people! She literally.
I know she destroyed my camera earlier. Let's hope that doesn't happen again. Oh, it's going to happen again. All right, let's just drop you down. All right, sorry everybody. That's Kittalor. She's trying to participate.
People know me as Queen Beruthiel, so
that's right. Oh, good point. So anyway, Sauron. The quote is. To this, Sauron assented as one constrained, yet in his secret thought he received it gladly, for it chimed indeed with his desire. And Sauron passed over the sea and looked upon the land of Númenor, and in the city of Ar-Menellos in the days of its glory, and he was astounded. But in his heart within was filled with envy and hate. So it's really cool that he goes, and then he sees what they got. He's like, good Lord, these people are amazing. And it makes him envious and hate them even more. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, very Melkor-like, by the way. Who had this envy? Why did Melkor literally was the guy who destroyed everything that others built? Because so that's very Melkor-like. Yes. So I think we can agree he had the ring, and he even mentioned it in a letter. So
right.
This is our canon now.
That's our canon.
Yes. So do you talking about Morgoth? Why do you think what I find super interesting what we learn about Sauron? Then he rose from he was a hostage basically. He rose, I think, in about 3 or 4 years from prisoner to advisor to the king. Power of the ring. And do you think that Sauron, what was the reason? Because he built this, I call it Temple of Doom in Ar-Menellos. He had this temple
of Doom.
Where he burned Temple of Doom, and he burned people alive there, the faithful, and
the faithful sacrifices.
Why did he want people to pray and to cherish and to? Why was this Morgoth's temple?
Right, like in other words, why not say, "Hey, worship me, and I'll give you the things." Yeah. He puts it off on, "Oh no, there's a higher power than me, Melkor." And you're right; it is fascinating. Maybe he thinks because he's prisoner, he feels like he can't sell the idea that he's like this higher power, maybe, and that he feels like, oh no, there's this other thing that's more powerful than me.
Yeah,
perhaps.
So you don't think he was, because the thing is, look, the Númenorians, they had something like, they wrote down the history. We know that because we learn later on that they lost all the history with the the kitty cat.
Yeah, I'm having this fight off screen with her right now. So anyway, okay.
I know what you're going through. I know they're attracted by the light and the ring.
Yes, they are.
No, yeah, oh yeah, the Númenóreans, they wrote down their history, so they knew, because we know Ar-Pharazôn and other kings knew the story of their ancestor Earendil, and him, fighting Morgoth and pleading with the Valar. So they must know the name Morgoth must have ring a bell, right? Seriously,
Right,
they
it's
knew.
not like a new entity. They're like,
No.
oh, you mean the guy that at the end of the first age we had to go fight? Got it, yeah.
Yeah, because later on in the Third Age, people literally react. Like just a few very educated people even know of Sauron, of the War of the Last Alliance, stuff like that. It is like when Númenor drowned, people literally went back to the Dark Ages, and it was just about survival.
Right,
And
all that lore got lost. Like all
lost.
the, it's like the
Yeah, and
Library of Alexandria type of thing, or just
exactly. Yep. I have a video about
there
that.
you
Yeah.
go. Okay.
All the knowledge got lost with the drowning. And I always, because in the Third Age people were like, oh, Sauron the necromancer, never heard of that. If we would have that kind of, we still learn about the first, about the second, whatever world war, we learn about ancient history. They were completely clueless, and I do think the Númenóreans were not. And I do think, at least for the higher ups, there must have the name Melkor, Morgoth, whatever you want to call him. They must have heard that before. So my idea is Sauron wanted to be believable, like telling them, worship Morgoth. I'm one of his servants, his main guy, because that would make it plausible and make, like them, okay, you're that guy, that guy.
Well, also just maybe the idea of like, look, you might remember from the history books, he was opposed to the Valar, and that's kind of what I'm advocating to you. You should oppose the ban of the Valar, and who does it best? Melkor. So maybe that's the idea of like, I'm trying to convince them Valar bad.
Yeah, full of bad. No, but because when I first read it, I was always like, why doesn't he? Because he is that type of guy that would obviously want everybody to worship him. And later on in the Third Age, Morgoth is never mentioned again, because he could have gone back and just say, I'm Sauron, I'm Morgoth's first lieutenant, but he never did. He literally, this was all about him and the ring in the Third Age. But I do believe, because people were clueless, they lost all this knowledge, and he could start anew, and like he's the.
That's a good point. Yeah. You're like a new set of rubes that I can kind of like, convince to do my bidding.
Yeah, but I was in the beginning, why is he not making them worship him? Because,
you would think that in a lesser story, that's probably where it goes, right? Like, hey, but in Tolkien's mind, he's like, no, okay, how would he best convince these folks that he's telling the truth? And it's like, no, it isn't for me. Hey, I'm just trying to tell you the truth. Yeah, and
it's cool that he brought that back, because literally in the Second Age, Morgoth was out of the picture. Like he was no longer relevant, and this is the taking over of power. But still, he connects it to the First Age and to all of that. That's cool that he did that, and he put that in there. Yes.
Yeah, the legacy. Yeah.
So, do you have another super cool theory about Ar-Pharazôn and Sauron?
A cool theory about Ar-Pharazôn and Sauron.
Or something you want people to know, what they maybe don't know about this duo and what happened.
That's a good question. One of the things I like is, it's in a similar quote to the one that I was reading before about how Sauron was jealous. One of the things I thought was interesting is, Ar-Pharazôn comes with his army. Hey, Sauron basically, instead of fighting, decides, I'm going to surrender. But the quote is, so it says, therefore he, Sauron, humbled himself before Ar-Pharazôn, smoothed his tongue, and men wondered, for all that he said seemed fair and wise. This is the part that's interesting. But Ar-Pharazôn was not yet deceived, and it came into his mind that for the better keeping of Sauron and of his oaths and fealty, he should be brought to Númenor. So it's interesting. In that moment, he's still wary of this guy. It's not, he doesn't just instantly be like, okay, whatever you want. Like he's cautious, but somehow it's almost like in the game of chess. Yeah. Sauron was 3 steps ahead. Like, well, I realize you're going to be cautious, and about being cautious, you're going to take me to Númenor, which is exactly what I want. So, ha 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 ha. But it wasn't just Ar-Pharazôn wasn't just a puppet in the fact that he just went along with whatever Sauron wanted. He thought he was in control when maybe he wasn't so much.
Well, I would be if I had the biggest armada the world has ever seen. You would think, and then the guy who literally, ruled over Middle Earth for a really long time, who's known as the Dark Lord. I mean, you
right? No, you're right. His ego had plenty of reason to be huge, right?
Yeah. But I really do believe that what you say is 100% right, that Sauron had all this planned out. And I do think him proclaiming himself king of the world, king of all men, wasn't that that wasn't what he wanted to do. He did that because he knew Ar-Pharazôn would come for him.
The lure, yeah.
100%. And I do think he knew of the power of Númenor, because if he would have seen the army and it's weird because Tolkien, kind of how he writes it, looks like Sauron for the first time saw the full might of the army. But I do think that he was in Númenor before. He knew what was happening. He knew they were literally gearing up. Kings before did that, like since Aldarion, King Aldarion, they geared up.
Technology too was just
technology,
head shoulders above Middle Earth.
They had flying ships and whatnot. Like, I mean, I'm just saying. And Middle Earth was still in the Dark Ages. And I do think he was in Númenor before. He saw, oh my God, they are growing, they are gearing up. In a few years, I won't have the power to destroy them or fight them, or they will take over Middle Earth, because he knew the way they were growing.
It could be growing as well.
The way they are growing, they will come to Middle Earth and their colonies will grow as well. And where's my space? I think he knew that. And he was in Númenor. He saw that. He saw what was happening. Maybe the Witch King and the other Númenorians who got turned told him that, because they lived at that time in Númenor. They knew what was going on. And so he made this plan of, okay, this is the time now to proclaim myself, to lure him to Middle Earth. This is very tinfoily, people, now. But I do think it could be true.
I hear you.
To lure him to Middle Earth, and then, getting captured. He knew that would happen.
I think also, Sauron carries a grudge. And so I think the fact that he was defeated, 1,000+ years earlier, he was like, oh, note to self. Númenorians seem to save the day when I try to take over this place. So I should get rid of them. They're going to be my biggest threat. And so it took him a while, but he figured out how to do it, over time.
Yeah. And the thing, again, like dividing the Númenorians, the Valar and the Elves. So before he did that, he came to the Númenorians, he made sure they had no more allies. He made sure of that. So it was easier later on, to fulfill his plan, because there was no one warning them. The elves didn't warn them. They were just like, okay, good, then we're gone by. But seriously.
You're right. The friendships that Aldarion had forged way back when, over the time, as you mentioned, that the legacy of the kings leading up to Ar-Pharazôn had just broken that friendship, and so it was no longer, there wasn't an alliance to be had.
Yeah, and I do think that was him being in Númenor and not just them effing up. I really do think he influenced, because this is what he's known for. He influences people and their minds and their hearts. And he had the ring at that time. He had the ring for centuries. So I think he did that. I think he was there before. He influenced other kings, other high ups, and this is how, it got worse and worse. They banned the elves. I don't think it was just Númenóreans doing this. I think they were influenced.
No, I hear you. That makes sense to me. I'm
Pet
on
theory.
board.
Yes. I sold somebody my theory. Yay. No, but yeah, he's such an, and alone I want to see him on film because I imagine him like, this epic warrior with I don't know, with a beard. There's some really cool images of him, whenever I Google
Oh,
images
right. Some
for my
cool
videos.
fan art. Yeah.
The fan art is amazing on him, especially. I think the people love his character.
Well, when he makes the great armaments, the huge navy to go attack the Valar, his ship is the Al-Corundus, the castle of the sea. Just makes me think of this giant castle, floating around. So yeah, big, huge, dramatic, cinematic.
Yeah.
Which is why, obviously the Amazon series will have a place for him, but I do think it will be maybe like a season 3, maybe something like that, as opposed to a season 1 type thing.
Yeah, because I really do think, it will end, because the end of the Second Age is basically the drowning of Númenor. There are just a few years. There's just, it then ends with them colonizing and founding Arnor and Gondor, but that's just a few years. So basically, the drowning and the end of Númenor is the end of the Second Age.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that they perhaps the show would reproduce the War of the Last Alliance that we saw, the little montage of at the beginning of Lord of the Rings. But yeah, you're right. As a practical matter,
circle to start with Sauron forging the ring or rings, and then him losing the one ring. That would make it
you're right.
Perfect.
It makes a ring itself.
Makes a ring. It's Morgoth's ring.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So no, I really find that character so fascinating. And yeah, as you said, he's not portrayed as stupid or anything. He's not. But then you think, oh my God, how could you fall for that? You're a clever guy. But
your enemy, but yeah.
His greed and this immortality. I always come back to the immortality because Tolkien definitely says, the older he got, the more he panicked, and the more he believed Sauron's words. This is how Tolkien describes it.
Oh, and to compare it to say Star Wars, it's the idea of Anakin is lured in by the idea of how to cheat death, how to overcome death, and it's it turns him evil as well. So that's a situation of like, immortality is a carrot, and it's a tough lure to overcome.
Yeah. And I mean, Anakin was less evil because he did it for Padme and the love for Padme. Hashtag justice for Anakin.
True. He's not I would say Ar-Pharazôn was worse pre-Sauron than Anakin was, pre-Emperor. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, he did it for his own mortality. It's not like he was like, And what I also find interesting, that Tolkien always, the having children thingy is always a big factor of telling something is not wrong. And, it's always like they just had one daughter and then, it wasn't a good sign.
And Ar-Pharazôn, has no kids. They don't have
zero. Yeah, and they were married for a time, so that alone shows you. Obviously, I mean, Miriel was probably not really happy. And I find it interesting that her name, but maybe he forced her, but her name was also Gimra, whatever her name was, but it was not Tar, it was Ar as well.
Right. Yeah. Right. I'm forgetting the pronunciation there, but yeah, you're right. He forced a particular name on her, which went against the idea of her being of the faithful. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It was coerced big time. She was, I'm sure, no fan of it. When she was trying to climb Menel Tarma at the end, I don't think it was to get one last look. I could see across the sea to my true love. No. She was like that guy.
Yeah, but it's sad that all these Númenorian queens and that I'm a woman and I want to find in, but it is I know Tolkien was definitely not against ideas of feminism and all that. You have really cool. You have Galadriel. You have other characters. You have Luthien. I mean, hello, she was actually better equipped to fight all that than Beren
And you
himself.
talked about characters who use their voice for power. I mean, Luthien probably more so than anyone else.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not bashing Tolkien and feminism and or female roles, but in the end, this was a story about wars, and he was a child of his time, and there were not that many women fighting in wars. This was not the Amazonian legend. So, yeah, but then it is sad that he portrays always these very weak queens, and she must have been. But then I think there were so many um, evil kings before her, so the number of the faithful was very slim, and I mean a lot of them burned, and the number of the kingsmen was very, like people following that line. There were so many. I think she wouldn't even stand a chance, probably being faithful.
I got you. No, you're right. You're right. It would be a political cost,
Yeah,
and maybe a mortal cost to
yeah,
announcing that. Yeah,
because later on in Gondor, if you remember, there was civil war in Gondor over the throne. There were people usurping the throne and saying, you're a mixed blood, you can't take over. You're that happened later on with
the
a
kin strife, I believe. Yeah.
yes, and so that happened later. But yeah, she didn't. She just we know she married him, and that was it for her. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's quite a story, and um, just the dramatic quality of an entire land disappearing, Atlantis style,
Yes.
is and you just feel that loss, the
Hmm.
loss of, as you mentioned, all that knowledge,
Yeah.
all the history gone. It's just whatever you can fit onto these 9 ships. That's
Yeah.
basically what's left of this entire rich culture that had survived for thousands of years, and it's just gone, and mainly due to the arrogance and the pride of this king who pushed and pushed and pushed until he
Mhm.
pushed too far, and it's a tragedy that you can see coming a mile away. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
here it comes. That turn, as you mentioned, like there's so many chances for them to turn around,
Mhm.
and they just don't, and they just don't.
No,
They're like,
no.
mm-mm-mm.
Yeah, and it shows you, like no matter how powerful you think you are, you basically, you can drown. You'll be no longer. And I think this is, what he it's like Babylon and all that, don't be too prideful, don't think too high of yourself. Yeah, the drowning is definitely, yeah, that's one of the things I definitely want to see, because again, I really do think then the later Rangers and Numenorians, the line of the faithful, they become very humble and they literally go back in time. They want to forget what happened, and this is why they don't talk about their history. Nobody talks about their history. They even say, when they talk about Ar-Pharazôn, they say with his pompous armada. This is how they, like not Ar-Pharazôn the, I don't know, the mighty warrior or whatever. They know they failed as men and they went to Middle Earth being very humble. Yes, they founded kingdoms and all that, but they literally went back to the Dark Ages and they were okay with that. They didn't use this technology. They still had that technology, right? But they went back to centuries earlier, basically where they started off coming before they went to Numenor. It's like a clean slate and start new. This is how I feel that
I
what the
got
nine
you.
Ships did.
Right, and maybe they thought, the ways we previously did things led to a terrible end. So why don't we
Yes.
try something a little different? Why
Yeah,
don't we,
and
you know,
be more humble and all that, and and then they mingled with the people of Middle Earth and all that. So it was a very, yeah, different feeling the nine, the survivors of Numenor had, and it was a bit like they wanted to forget their history, and that's in a way sad because humankind effed up so many times, but we always try to, like, don't
If you
forget.
forget
And
it, you repeat it, right? Yeah.
yeah, well, that's worse, but no, but you try to work through it, right? This is where, like in Germany, we talk about in school a lot about the First and Second World War. We learn that's not good what we did, but in a way you feel they just want to forget it, and they don't teach their children about. Why don't they teach their children about the 25 kings of Númenor? I don't think they did that.
I think that's
um
true. What's interesting to me too is in the idea of the Second Age, especially as it might be told through the lens of the Amazon series.
mhm.
Um, we're going to almost certainly start with the Forging of the Ring
Yes.
in Middle Earth, and so we'll
Yeah.
probably see the politics happening in Númenor at that time. But
Yeah.
it's tough to see characters that will be all throughout the series.
Mhm.
I think what you're going to see is there's one guy who's common to all of these stories,
Mhm.
and that's Sauron. And so it's
Yeah.
interesting that you almost feel like you almost be seeing it through the villain's point of view, perhaps, because he is the guy that's in Middle Earth. He's the guy on Númenor. He's the guy at War of the Last Alliance.
Yeah.
He's the one common thread
Yeah.
through all these stories.
I do think it's his story. Like, look, you mentioned Star Wars. I'm the biggest Star Wars fan, and it is Anakin's story. Like, all of that is Anakin's story, and this is what Lucas wanted to tell, right? The fall and redemption of a character. And I mean, obviously, Sauron is not
It's not going
Anakin.
to be redemption, right? Yeah, but the fall.
The four, yeah, the four, but that's in the Minoran. So, but I really do think Sauron is the one of the main. I mean, he forced he forced all this on all these people, on all these races. Otherwise, it would be like Valinor, blissfully boring. Nothing would happen. No, it's true. Like,
Blissfully boring.
I
Good
don't
point.
want to be Valinor. It's boring as f. Like, who wants to be there for
And
a
in
day?
fact, we don't know really much other than obviously when Númenor attacks. We don't see a whole lot happening in Valinor in the Second Age. Second Age is pretty quiet,
Yes.
quiet and boring as the Second Age goes along. For
It has
Valinor.
always been boring there. As soon as the Noldor, as soon as Feanor left, it has been boring in Valinor. Come on. I
All right,
mean,
fair enough, fair enough.
the Vanya, like, oh my God, give me, like, that.
Blissful, some might
Yeah.
say. But yeah, right.
Yeah. And
Blissfully
it
boring.
is a bit like our history, we know less about heaven because why would, like, yeah, it's nice there. That's it. That's all I need to know. We know way more about hell because, it's
There's
first of all more
drama.
interesting, and you don't want to go there, and a lot of, like, this is what they teach you more about hell than they teach you about heaven.
Good point.
So yeah,
More about Númenor. Yeah.
But yeah, downfall will definitely be a very. I just want to see Armenelos and these cities, like, really rising in power, and it's the Golden City. How cool is that?
I like the image to me is of imminent doom for the island
Yeah.
and Elendil and Isildur and the family, and they're getting on these ships and they're trying to escape before they die, basically, right? And it's this promise, and they have the Palantiri, and they're taking what little bits they have, like, just leave it, and like they're going to try to build a new world in Middle Earth, and that's that cinematic quality of that, and then knowing what comes after, knowing that there's thousands of years that are spawned by this moment is pretty cool.
Yeah, 100%. And what is super interesting is they came on 9 ships. I mean, later on, more ships came. Over, I think, 30 or 35 years, they colonized Númenor. It wasn't just that, but those were the beginning ships with Elros and the other.
And I think they did have some colonies already in Middle Earth, so they were coming to some folks who were already there. But you're right, yeah. In terms of
definitely, they definitely. I mean, not the Black Númenóreans, but yes, no, they didn't start completely new. There were cities, obviously, and everything, but still. 9 ships came and founded the island in the beginning. 9 ships left, and that was all that was left of that.
Yeah, no, it's just
Greatest kingdom of men.
You just feel that tragedy. It just drips off the page in that moment.
Mm-hmm. And not everybody was guilty, but God just said, I mean, in a way, you're all guilty. You will all drown. Yeah, it's the little people living somewhere near Amenelos, not even knowing who is Sauron, they all drowned. And that is actually really, really tragic. They didn't worship Sauron. They probably just, lived their life. But everybody drowned, millions of people.
It's like at the end of the first age, if you Google it, you can find, some enterprising nerds have put together like a map of like what the first age coastline of Middle Earth looked like versus what an early second age coastline. And you just see how much of Middle Earth is now underwater thanks to the War of Wrath. You're like, whoa, that's a huge amount of land that obviously there were plenty of people who, were not terrible folks, but they're gone now, and their house and their land and their woods, whatever, all that's, it was a huge cataclysm.
Yeah. And it's interesting because they were the chosen ones. They were the race that was given that island because they aided in the war against the real baddie, against Morgoth. So they did something good. And then they effed up on the way, on the line, like really badly. So drowning this for Eru to interfere with the world, that takes a lot.
It does. You're right. But I liked your thought on the fact that it was maybe the die was cast when they gave him the island and let him see the glories of Valinor. So that's interesting. Yeah. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
Over time, strain,
Yeah, and the thing is, the Valar never understood the humans. The concept of the humans, they never got. This is like, they couldn't even understand Melkor. They couldn't understand evil. And they never understood the concept of men. That was very foreign. Like, they lived a very short life. It's always like depicted as a candle burning very, very bright, but like burning out. But while it burns, it's very bright and alive. And the Valar, they never understood that. They never understood these feelings and whatever humans had. And and then they gave them this island, and showing them all that, like putting temptation in front. It's like, with the apple and the snake, putting temptation in front of them and expecting nothing will happen.
They were wrong.
Yeah.
Something happened big time. Yeah.
But I could have told you that in the beginning.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. It's, maybe the idea, they were naive, perhaps, in the idea of like, oh, wow, look, we gave you these awesome things.
Yeah.
Didn't necessarily think it all the way through.
Yeah. Same with, like when Melkor was in front of them and bound with Angainur and chained and blah, 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 and nobody understood that he could really be that evil. They didn't get it, but he was
right. We'll
Manwë's
punish you, but then you're fine.
But he was supposed to be Manwë's brother, right? But then they didn't understand that he was so evil, and they never understood humans. Not that they were evil, but they were different, and they had a short life span compared to that. And if you're just a nobody living in, I don't know, somewhere Middle Earth and never heard of the Valar, then you obviously don't want what you don't know. But if you see it in front of you and they're coming to your island and trade with you, you want it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I agree. Yeah, you see this better way and you want that thing. And the idea that I like your concept that the Valar kind of on paper understood humanity, but maybe the idea that since they didn't themselves have this gift of men, they really had no actual comprehension of what that meant, and so they couldn't make choices with that in mind. No, that's cool.
They made choices for the elves, and they understood them, and the Vanya are the closest to them and the closest to good and the closest to angels, and this is why did the Vanya live there, right? So
they like the light of the trees while it lasted.
Yeah, cool, good. So those are my pet theories. I learned the word pet theory.
It works. They're good. I like them. I'm on board.
Yay, good. So do you have anything more to add? Where like at an hour now, I always I want, if you have something urgently you want everybody to know about Ar-Pharazôn or anything Numenor related. Um
No, I am looking forward to seeing how Amazon depicts the
yeah.
technology in particular of Numenor. I think they could go so many different ways with it, and
Mhm.
they're going to put the budget into it. They spent like $1 billion on this thing, so I think it's going to look great. And
Yeah.
I'm really eager to see the culture that is depicted on screen, and I'm hoping it's it captures the feel of Numenor on the page, and
Yeah.
I'm optimistic. I think they can pull that off.
Same. Oh my God. Yeah, same. I always say that. Like all these clickbaity things saying
Mm.
the Amazon show is doomed. Like, have you seen anything? Like,
Yeah, right.
snippets.
We'll get a teaser trailer. We'll get some stuff out. We'll just hold your
Yeah.
roll. Let's check this out. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, what I really want to see, they basically started as farmers, right? They started as farmers. Like most of Numenor was farmland, and there were more sheeps in some regions.
Right.
So and then them becoming this greatest armada of men and that greatest civilization mankind has ever seen. I want to see that actually. And I mean, it's 3,000 years. We won't see everything. We can't start at the beginning because I think it's too long. What you said, this is what I keep saying. You need a coherent, you have Sauron and some of the elves, which lived through the 3,300 years, but you
Galadriel
don't
runs.
want every episode a human king to die so you can fit
Right.
in.
I feel like I mean, to me, and maybe I'm not the guy writing it, but I feel like it would make most sense to do time jumps between seasons. You try to more or less stay within
Yeah,
like a 100-year period or something in a
yeah,
season. Then you
yeah.
jump to another, and so that you're not jumping within a season, because I think that would be very jarring. If I
Oh my
wait,
God, no,
it's
then
only
you
a
can't.
thousand years from now. What? Yeah,
No, yeah, yeah. You need to relate to a character. You want to see him grow or fail or whatever. You can't
correct.
show that in. You can't show Ar-Pharazon's journey in one episode, or you at least need a season for that. And that's just as I said, he just ruled for 64 years, so that's not a long, compared to all of Lord of the Rings. That's a very short time.
Yep,
But
yep.
then, the books were just a few years, and in the movies, they even shortened the time span because Frodo didn't wait, whatever, 10
Great
years
point. You're
at
right.
home.
They definitely condensed the time for the
Hmm.
for the movies, and
Yeah.
to good
So,
effect.
yeah. Yeah. As you, I'm very excited about the show. I can't wait till they drop a trailer. And yeah, I think they picked. Well, I mean, obviously, I like First Age better. I want dragons, people. But
Well, yeah, I guess they don't have the. I mean, I don't know all the rights issues, but it sounds like they don't have the rights at the
no.
moment to the first stage. But you know what? If this thing
Yeah.
takes off and becomes the next Game of Thrones in terms of popularity,
Yeah.
they'll get the rights to the first stage. I mean, that's if this show works, they'll
Yeah.
figure out a way to do the first stage, which
Yeah.
is great.
Yeah. I'm pretty. Oh my God! Please.
Fall of Gondolin, all that. Anyway, yeah.
Oh my. Yes. That's my favorite part and the worst book of the three great tales. It's the best story, The Fall of Gondolin, because my heart, Meglin. My heart goes out to Meglin.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh, I love it. Like seriously, Idril is one of my favorite
Speaking of
characters.
villains, but yeah, you're right. No, yes, Idril.
Yeah. She was so clever and so cool, and she saw all this coming, and she built a tunnel, and like nobody ever listens to these women. Nobody ever listens to Idril or to Melian. Like listen to the girls, people. They know.
Agreed. I mean, and
Yeah.
Luthien. I mean, the Baron and Luthien story. I mean, she's a wrecking crew. She's a one woman army basically. So yeah.
Yeah, but you can't cast her because she's literally out of this world beautiful. Like, find a woman playing her. I'll marry that woman. No.
Maybe
Um,
maybe you have to do an animated version. Who knows? Yeah.
yeah. Cool. So epic. I really, really like this talk.
Yeah. Thanks a
obviously,
lot.
if you ever want to come back and talk Númenor, the Amazon show, anything, I think one day we have to do the mortality immortality dialogue.
Let's do it.
It is really such an interesting topic that was so important for Tolkien because yes, he was a Christian, and that was deep rooted within him. And I do think that this topic is so important for how, not just for Numenor, for a lot of themes like elves giving up, female elves giving up their immortality to found houses and all that. This is how the line of Aragorn and Arwen was found, and all that. I think it's such a cool topic, and
Oh,
race is not.
Elros and Elrond each getting to choose. Do you want to be mortal? Do you want to be immortal? I mean, the ability to actually make that choice and figure out where that path might lead you. Like, wow.
Yes, exactly. So that is such a cool and interesting topic. So, and I do think a lot of people, don't know the additional material because that is not even from the Silmarillion. And yeah, so that's a cool
I'm
topic.
on board. Sounds
Yay,
great.
cool. So everybody, please check out Matt's the Dork Lords. You also do Marvel content, right?
I do a little bit of stuff that interests me generally. So right now we're talking WandaVision, for instance. We just finished talking about the great sci-fi show, The Expanse. That's a fantastic show.
I still haven't seen that. Everybody tries to convince me, and I stopped at episode 2 or 3, and I was like,
I had to be convinced myself, frankly, but I'm convinced now. I'll put it that way. So, but to each their own. I get it. And so, but a large part of what I do is the Tolkien content.
yes.
I've got my LOTR playlist. As I say, just hit 100 videos on it, which is like, wow, where did the time go? But anyway, so yeah, Dork Lords, and so nice to be chatting with you, and maybe I can have you come chat with me on the Dork Lords at some point.
Definitely. I just love to talk Tolkien. I always say, in my real life, except my dad who introduced me to this world, I have nobody in my real life to talk about this.
I hear you.
So, when I tell my friends, they're like, what are you talking about, woman? So yeah, I enjoyed this community we have, and the community is growing. I introduced you to the other guys, and because a lot of people are always asking, like, do you guys get along? And I can confirm, and it's really true because I see a lot of toxic behavior in other fandoms, and as far as now, and I do think people who like Tolkien, who are very deep into this, they have a sense of community and friendship and all. This is why they're there for this content. And seriously, all the creators, we became friends. And
as you say, there's that sense of like, oh, somebody else has the same passion I do. Awesome. I'm not gonna shoo you away. Yay, cool, let's talk.
And this is the feeling, and this is what I want to achieve, with inviting everybody on my channel and talking about these themes and topics we all love. And it's like talking, to a friend who loves the same stuff. And this is what all the creators feel like that do Tolkien. And that's a beautiful and cool thing. And I think the audience feels that. And so I just want to confirm we're all friends. And yes, there are many videos that are very similar. They're like 1,000 Galadriel videos out there, but we're all so different. And
right, everybody's got their own little take on things.
Yeah, and I really like that. So yes, we're all friends, people.
Indeed. Confirmed.
Yes. And now we have a new friend.
Yay!
Yay! Cool. So thank you very much. Thank you, my lovelies. And what's up next for you? Do you have one Lord of the Ring video coming? You said the short ones you're doing.
The mini topics. I'm going to be recording that in the next day or so, and then putting that up. I mean, some of the topics, actually, some of them hit on what we talked about here with some Númenor questions. And for instance, what was Muriel thinking while she's running up Mental Tarma? Was one of the questions somebody asked.
Cool.
So anyway, so stuff like that. Yeah.
So you were well prepared. Yay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So check that out. For me, I'm dropping in the next days my second elf, the I wanted to say Teleri, the
The Nandor or
the Noldor, yeah. The next video will be about the Noldor I'm dropping, and then Friday, people, if you watch this before Friday, we will have the next Q&A session, and this will be about your questions you sent in, and it will mainly be about orcs apparently, because you have so many questions about orcs.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so I have every Friday I have a Q&A session. It's not live, it's send in your questions. So people send in your
kind
questions.
Like the mini topics, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's very similar, yeah.
Nice,
and so I'll answer these questions, and yeah, that will be next Friday. And this video will drop whenever I can be bothered to upload it.
Right, and the last ones I just did a 2-part series on Feanor, which I spent a whole lot of time working on. So anyway,
so good.
I'm pretty proud of that one. So
That
if you're
is
interested in
so
Feanor, check
good.
it out.
Oh my god, that is so good. I mean, he's a baddie, but we like the baddies here on this channel.
Oh, he had such a huge impact, right, on the lore. So
I mean, the whole book was called after the thing
right.
he created. So
Correct.
I mean, yes, he's important.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. So thank you, my lovelies. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Till the next time.